I want to speak to you tonight about the most dangerous place a human mind can enter. Not a prison, not a battlefield, not a place marked on any map of the world. I am speaking about a condition of mind, a silent condition, a gradual condition. A condition so common that millions of men live inside it for years without ever realizing they have surrendered their greatest powers while doing so. I call it the devil's workshop. And before your mind dismisses that phrase as symbolic exaggeration, I want you to listen carefully. Because the devil I am speaking about is not a creature with horns and fire and ancient mythology attached to his name. The devil I am speaking about is far more practical than that, far more dangerous. The devil is drift. The devil is aimlessness. The devil is the slow surrender of a human mind that no longer directs itself deliberately and therefore becomes vulnerable to every destructive influence surrounding it. I have studied failure for 40 years, not merely financial failure, human failure. The failure of men who once possessed enormous potential but slowly lost control of their direction until they became smaller, weaker, more fearful, and more resentful versions of themselves. And I discovered something that shocked me. Most men are not destroyed suddenly. They decay gradually, one compromise at a time, one distraction at a time, one undisciplined thought at a time, until eventually they wake up inside a life they never consciously chose. That is the devil's workshop, the undirected mind, the idle mind, the mind that is no longer governed by purpose. Because understand this clearly, a mind without a definite purpose does not remain empty. It becomes occupied. And if you do not occupy your own mind deliberately, the world will occupy it for you, with fear, with noise, with confusion, with doubt, with resentment, with distraction, with endless trivialities that consume energy while producing nothing of lasting value. The undisciplined mind becomes a workshop for destructive forces. Now, let me tell you how this process begins. It rarely begins dramatically. It begins with drift. A man stops deciding clearly, stops directing his thoughts intentionally, stops guarding the condition of his mind. He begins consuming more than he creates, complaining more than he builds, reacting more than he chooses. And slowly, almost invisibly, the control of his life shifts outward. His moods become dependent on circumstances. His energy becomes dependent on external stimulation. His identity becomes dependent on the approval of other people. He no longer governs himself internally. And the moment a man loses internal government, outside forces rush to govern him instead. This is why definiteness of purpose is so important. Purpose is mental occupation. Purpose gives direction to thought. Purpose organizes energy. Purpose protects the mind from becoming available to destructive influences. The man with a definite purpose does not have endless psychological space available for fear, gossip, resentment, envy, and confusion. His mind is busy building, and a building mind is difficult to corrupt. But the drifting man is vulnerable to everything. Let me tell you the symptoms of drift: indecision, chronic distraction, emotional inconsistency, lack of persistence, dependence on entertainment, dependence on comfort, endless consumption without creation, the habit of talking about life instead of building one. These are not random weaknesses. They are evidence that the mind has stopped directing itself deliberately. The drifting man wakes without urgency. He moves through the day reacting to whatever demands attention first. He mistakes motion for progress, busyness for productivity, stimulation for meaning. And because he lacks direction, he slowly becomes exhausted by a life that never accumulates toward anything significant. Now listen carefully, because this next point matters deeply. Drifted feels easier than discipline in the short term. That is why so many men surrender to it. The disciplined life demands conscious effort. Purposeful thinking requires energy. Self-control requires awareness. Decision requires courage. But drift requires nothing. A drifting man simply follows impulse. An impulse always chooses comfort over growth. Always. This is why the devil's workshop becomes so dangerous, because it feels harmless while it is destroying a man. The drifting man often looks comfortable from the outside, entertained, distracted, temporarily relaxed. But underneath the comfort, there is something else growing. Weakness, a gradual weakening of initiative, a weakening of imagination, a weakening of discipline, a weakening of belief in his own power, until eventually the man who once intended to build something extraordinary no longer even remembers clearly what he wanted. That is the true tragedy of drift. Not merely failure, forgetfulness, the forgetting of one's own potential. Now let us go deeper. The drifting mind becomes extremely vulnerable to fear, because fear enters most easily into empty mental space. A mind without purpose naturally searches for stimulation, and fear is one of the strongest emotional stimulants in existence. This is why drifting men become obsessed with problems, obsessed with danger, obsessed with criticism, obsessed with politics, conflict, gossip, catastrophe, outrage, and negativity. Their minds crave emotional movement because purposeful movement no longer exists, and fear provides movement. But it is destructive movement, movement without direction, energy without creation. This is why I have told you repeatedly that the mind must be occupied deliberately, not occasionally, daily, every morning. Before the world gets its hands on your attention, you must decide what occupies your mind, what enters it, what remains there, and what must be rejected immediately. The undisciplined mind accepts everything, and eventually becomes controlled by everything. Now let me tell you something most men never fully understand. The environment surrounding a man shapes the condition of his thinking more powerfully than he realizes. Drifting people create drifting environments. Fearful people create fearful environments. Negative minds reinforce negative minds. And a man who spends enough time around drifting people eventually begins drifting himself, unless his purpose is extraordinarily strong. This is why your mastermind matters so deeply. Association is psychological influence. The people surrounding you are constantly affecting your standards, your expectations, your discipline, your thinking, and your identity, whether you realize it or not. Show me a man's closest influences, and I will show you the future condition of his mind. Because minds are contagious, energy is contagious, direction is contagious, so is drift. Protect your environment, protect your attention, protect your standards, protect your mind with the seriousness of a man protecting the most valuable asset he possesses. Because that is exactly what your mind is. Now I want to speak directly about distraction. Distraction is one of the devil's greatest tools. Because distraction feels innocent. A little entertainment, a little scrolling, a little avoidance, a little comfort. And individually these things appear harmless, but together they slowly train the mind toward fragmentation, toward shortened attention, toward dependency on stimulation, toward the inability to remain focused long enough to build anything meaningful. Great achievements require sustained concentration, and concentration is becoming increasingly rare. The distracted man cannot persist because his attention has been conditioned toward interruption. He cannot think deeply because shallow stimulation has rewired his habits of thought. He cannot tolerate silence because silence forces him to encounter himself directly. So he escapes into noise, more entertainment, more distraction, more consumption, anything except stillness. But listen carefully. Stillness is where power returns. The man who can sit quietly and direct his own mind deliberately possesses a strength that most people no longer develop. Because the drifting mind fears silence. Silence exposes drift. Silence reveals the absence of purpose. Silence forces a man to confront what he has been avoiding. This is why many men stay constantly stimulated, because stillness would reveal truths they do not wish to face. Now let me tell you how to escape the devil's workshop. First, develop a definite purpose. Without purpose, discipline eventually collapses. A man must know why he is building, why he is sacrificing, why he is enduring difficulty. Purpose organizes the entire personality around a meaningful direction. Second, govern your mind daily. Do not wait until fear appears before attempting to control your thinking. Build the habit of deliberate thought every single day. Read things that strengthen your mind. Study ideas that elevate your standards. Protect your attention from constant negativity. And most importantly, think independently. The drifting man absorbs opinions. The purposeful man examines them. Third, control your environment. Distance yourself from chronic negativity, from cynicism, from aimlessness, from people who mock ambition because they abandon their own. This does not mean arrogance. It means protection. The seed of purpose must be protected while it is still growing. Fourth, practice disciplined action. Action defeats drift. Movement toward a definite purpose restores energy. The man who begins building again begins believing again. Because confidence is not produced by positive thinking alone. Confidence is produced by evidence. And disciplined action creates evidence. Finally, learn solitude, not loneliness. Solitude. The ability to sit quietly with your own mind without needing constant distraction. This is where clarity grows. This is where purpose strengthens. This is where a man regains authority over himself. Now I want to speak directly to the man listening tonight who knows he has been drifting. You know it already. You have felt it. The lack of direction, the inconsistency, the exhaustion that comes from motion without meaning, the slow fading of ambition you once carried with fire in your chest. Listen to me carefully. You are not broken, you are undirected, and those are entirely different things. A drifting man can become powerful again remarkably quickly once purpose returns. Because much of the weakness was never permanent weakness. It was misdirected energy, scattered energy, distracted energy. The power is still there. It simply needs direction again. Begin small if necessary, but begin deliberately. Wake with purpose. Move with purpose. Guard your mind with purpose. And stop allowing random influences to shape the direction of your life. Because if you do not choose your direction consciously, drift will choose it for you. And drift always leads downward. Always. Now let me close with this. The devil's workshop is not a place you enter once. It is a condition you must guard against continually. Every day the world attempts to distract your attention, weaken your discipline, scatter your thinking, and disconnect you from your purpose. Every day. Which means every day you must reclaim authority over your own mind. This is the real battle. Not against circumstances, against mental drift, against unconscious living, against the slow surrender of deliberate thought. The man who conquers himself becomes extremely difficult for the world to conquer, because he governs his own mind. And the governed mind becomes a force, a creative force, a disciplined force, a focused force, a force capable of building extraordinary things over long periods of time. That is the mind I am asking you to develop. Not tomorrow, now. Occupy your mind deliberately. Direct your energy intentionally. Protect your purpose fiercely. And never allow your mind to become the devil's workshop. Go build something worthy of your life.